Well, we've learned how to effectively manage change by driving action and using the sprint method for developing fast solutions. But how's that work in the real world?
To be able to do the design and the feedback mechanism from our customers in that short period of time was really invaluable. Being able to compress it to where we were able to roll out something new that really met our needs better that much quicker.
We talked to a CX professional that applied these methods in their own company on this episode of the CX Leader Podcast.
The CX Leader Podcast with Steve Walker is produced by Walker, a business consulting firm that helps our clients unlock the potential of their customer experiences by placing the customer at the heart of all their business decisions. You can find out more at walkerinfo.com.
Hello, I'm Steve Walker, Chairman and CEO of Walker Information, and also host of the CX Leader Podcast, and thank you for listening. The CX Leader Podcast is quickly becoming the place where CX professionals go to explore the topics and themes that help them become better leaders and leverage all the benefits of their customer experience, and help your customers and prospects want to do more business with you. In our last 2 episodes, we've covered methods and frameworks that the CX professional can use to effectively drive action and quickly develop and deploy solutions to maximize your customer experience. But we thought we'd take some time to ease the minds of the skeptics out there and talk to a real CX professional who's actually done this in a real live company. I'm joined today again by my colleague, Jack Walker, who introduced us to the sprint method on our last episode. Jack, thanks for coming back.
Good to be here again.
And joining us for the first time via WebEx from Houston, Texas, is our friend and client, Britt Kennedy, a Director of Customer Intelligence at Sysco. Welcome to the CX Leader Podcast, Britt.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us from Houston, Texas. It's always fun to have a real live client and practitioner on the podcast, and appreciate you dialing in. Just for a little background, why don't you just tell the audience a little bit about yourself and just a little bit about Sysco. I think everybody's probably seen the trucks. I know I see them almost every day. But for those who are not familiar, because really you do touch almost everybody, don't you?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Our trucks are all over the road. Sysco is the largest food service distributor. We provide food and non-food actually to businesses who sell food to consumers who eat out. That's restaurants, like you mentioned, and it can also be places like stadiums or hospitals, hotels, really any place that provides food for customers to eat.
How long have you been at Sysco, and why don't you explain to our listeners a little bit about what a Director of Customer Intelligence does there?
I have been at Sysco for almost 6 years, and what I'm responsible for is our Voice of the Customer program, so really getting that direct customer feedback from all of our customers, as well as market intelligence, so trying to understand what's happening in the industry and in the market, as well as our custom research. So the design on those trucks, or a lot of those things are things that my team is responsible for.
And just for interest, like how many customers would Sysco say that they have?
About 400,000 in certain capacities. That number changes quite a bit, but a lot.
400,000, and that would go from the largest restaurant chains and biggest hotels to a single restaurant in a town.
That's right.
And it really is. I know I've been associated with your company now for going on a decade, and it's just a fascinating business. Also, aren't you like 60-something thousand employees?
That's correct. In the U.S., Canada, and we've also recently added several European businesses, South American businesses as well, so worldwide. And
with all those points of distribution, a large percentage of those 60,000 would face customers or interact with customers.
That's correct. That's correct. The folks in our Houston office is very small contingent of people compared to the people that are working with our customers day in and day out.
Yep. Food is a local business, as I've learned. It really is amazing for those of us that have been in the CX business, just the scope and scale of what you guys accomplish with your customer experience program. Well, the last 2 episodes, we've really laid out a framework for how companies can make fast change occur in their organizations using these principles of the sprint. Jack went into great detail last podcast, but Jack, since you're here, would you just give listeners just a quick overview of how the sprint process works?
Yeah, absolutely. So Sprint is a book that came out a couple of years ago. It was written by a guy named Jake Knapp, who was a former Google Ventures employee, where I think this really was brought to light and put into use. The sprint model is an innovation process that takes an idea to prototype in a few days instead of months. It's a process that calls for locking 5 to 7 people, or what we like to call a 2-pizza team, into a room for a couple days, and it goes through 5 stages of their design process, which is map, sketch, decide, prototype, and test. And that first phase, or map, is a series of structured exercises that helps to bring all of the information known about the problem to the surface. Use a large wall, sticky notes are really used to visually present all of the data collected from personal experiences or expert interviews that have been conducted prior to or during this phase. And by the end of this stage, the group considers all the information available before picking a target to focus on for the remainder of the sprint. And that leads to the second phase, or sketch. And sketch is all about eliminating group thinking by first having everyone work individually to come up with a proposed solution to the problem based on all the information that was collected back in phase 1, in the mapping phase. And when all that individual work is done, the group comes back together and decides in that third phase. It's a group exercise where those individual solutions are presented and debated before ultimately combining the best thoughts and ideas into a decision on the sketch that should be prototyped and tested. And that leads to 4, which is prototype, where the group's going to get creative and artistic again, like they did in the sketch phase, actually creating a prototype of the solution. And the point of this is really to create a good enough prototype that can be used to showcase to customers and gather real feedback, which is that final phase, just to get that quick and honest feedback straight from the customers on your most important questions to help aid in readying your solution for go-to-market. So all of that happens in just a few days.
Yeah, so all the way from concept to actual live testing with real customers to a prototype in 5 days or less.
Yes.
And Britt, you recently did this with some folks at Walker, including Jack?
That's correct. We did. We had a great time doing that.
And they did a decent job for you?
I think so. We'll keep them.
Okay, thanks. Well, part of the real beauty of the CX Leader podcast is to be able to hear from actual practitioners that are really doing this in a business. So if you wouldn't mind, just talk a little bit about how the sprint process was applied at Sysco and what you guys got out of it.
So when we were working on this, what we wanted to do was really overhaul our customer feedback mechanism. We'd been at this for a while, and we wanted to make sure that we were getting the right content and that we were meeting the needs of the organization. So ultimately, my team's job is to supply each team with customer insights that help drive the right change for customers. And that means different things for different departments. So we really needed to get everybody involved so that they felt heard, to understand what did they need to know from customers to do their job better.
That's great to hear, Britt. So how did you get the process started?
What we wanted to do was talk to some of those stakeholders ahead of the time that we started our sprint. We felt like we really wanted to maximize the time that we had with the team to really utilize on making the changes for our feedback mechanism, designing it in the right way, and really being able to test it. So the upfront work we did ahead of time, and we sat through several interviews with people across our organization to talk to them about what they needed to know that they didn't know, what did they want to know about how customers were experiencing Sysco. And once we had all of that information, we sat down, organized it into themes to try and better understand what were the aspects that we really needed to focus on the most to gather feedback that would drive change for the organization.
Then once you got all the feedback, what happened next in the sprint?
We started to map everything. That's where we started putting sticky notes up and really trying to find those themes. We moved things around. We were working in teams, and we were really trying to understand, okay, all of these items that these different customers or different constituents in our organization ask for, they're all around this particular theme. So we need to have a section on that. So we moved the sticky notes around, we prioritized things, and that was where we were about to get to work on trying to design it once we organized and decided this is the theme that we needed to focus on for the year.
And that all occurred in how long?
I think that process was like half of a day to really get organized.
And Jack, where are we now in this process of map, sketch, decide, prototype, test?
Yeah, so Britt just took us through kind of what we did from a map standpoint. So again, we cut down a lot of the time in person by doing a lot of those interviews ahead of time. And then we spent that half day organizing all the information, coming up with all the key themes. And then finally, at the end of that session, we had our target to focus on. And our target was to go develop this listening architecture system that we wanted to go design based on those key themes. All right, so now that we had our target, we was ready to go to that phase 2 or sketch. And again, that's all about eliminating group thinking and really giving everybody some individual time to come up with some solutions on their own before getting back for group discussion. And to help aid in that work, we actually had a pre-developed worksheet to help facilitate that, which was already coordinated in line from a framework standpoint on what you would want to get out of your customer listening architecture. So we broke down this worksheet into trying to bring out ideas on how we could best collect this type of information, how we would best analyze this information, how we would best share this information, and finally, what would be the most effective way to act on this information. So really broke it down from all those different aspects and creating a bunch of individual ideas for how that might work. And then once we did that, everybody got back together, every individual reported out on what they had come up with from an idea standpoint. The team collaborated, we mixed all the best ideas together, and finally at the end of that had a cohesive plan that really was our beacon or decision point that we had to now go through the rest of the process.
Back to you, Britt. So at this point, what's the next step that Sysco took in your journey?
So at this point, we visually mapped our customer architecture to show how it all connected and worked together. We were open to new ways to how we wanted to gather the feedback, so we thought about what new places we could actually gather customer feedback as well. And then we started to try and test it. We wanted to test it on customers, and we wanted to test it with the internal customers that we had that would be receiving the feedback to make sure that we were gathering their needs. For the testing with the customers, we actually just wanted to make sure that we were capturing everything that was important to them in their journey with Sysco. So were we gathering feedback on the things that were important to them to make sure that if we were making changes, that it would be the changes that made the most sense for making their experience with Sysco better. And for our internal customers, really the same thing. Were we gathering the feedback that would make the most difference for our customers? And so for our internal customers, we set up sticky notes of what we designed. We put it on the walls all over a room and had them walk through that process to see what it would look like in terms of the feedback that we would be gathering, from whom and where, and what types of feedback that would mean for them. And for our customers, we were able to do video chats with them and show them what it might look like and what types of things that we would be asking of them.
My guest on this week's podcast is Britt Kennedy, Director of Customer Intelligence at Sysco, and Jack Walker. This is the third in our three-part series on how CX professionals can drive change at their organization. And today we're talking about a case study involving Sysco Foods and how they actually applied a rapid product development methodology known as Sprint to enhance and upgrade their customer listening architecture and their whole CX program. Britt, I assume since you are here advocating for the Sprint process, you probably think it's a pretty effective way to apply design thinking and accelerate change. So what else can you tell us that you like most about the process?
It was great to be able to do the design and the feedback mechanism from our customers in that short period of time was really invaluable. We had people that we wanted to be involved in multiple places, and so being able to compress it into that time frame really helped us to take a process that probably would have taken us months to redesign, and it had taken us months in previous years, to where we were able to roll out something new that really met our needs better that much quicker.
And how long did it take altogether?
3.5 days.
It's awesome, something that would have taken months. You've been through the Sprint process. What would be your advice to your colleagues, your other CX pros out there in podcast land, if they were to want to tackle this? What's critical to getting a good output out of a change management Sprint process?
I think don't keep it internally with just the folks that typically work on your customer feedback or your CX strategy. We really wanted to make sure that we got everybody involved. So having a diverse group of stakeholders, I think, is critical. We learned some things when we were talking to people about some of the things that they wanted to know from our customers that they hadn't been able to capture in the past, that are things that are key in what we're capturing today. So kind of get outside the box and really make sure that you're including the right people in your team. And then secondly, the testing phase is so important. We, again, learned a lot when we were showing those same internal customers what we were thinking. They had really great feedback on what we could do to change or slightly tweak the designs that we came up with in those 3.5 days that really have made a difference in what we're gathering today.
Jack, you've done this with Sysco and other clients. What's your parting thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, this is the third and final part of our change management series on Sprint and applying design thinking to really use progressive ways to cause change in your organizations. I mean, we've got to stop the death by meeting. Months and months and months of meetings that get cross-functional people together. It's just not an effective solution to driving real change. It's a way to challenge the status quo in your organization, drive some real change for it that is ultimately going to improve your customer experience. And it's a grueling couple of days. It definitely is. But I'm sure that if you try it out, and you'll find that it's all worthwhile after you can see how much can be accomplished and the quality of the solution that's produced in those few days.
Britt, any final thoughts from you?
I just echo what Jack said, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you for being a guest on the program today. Jack Walker's a consultant here at Walker and our resident Sprint expert, and Britt Kennedy is a director of customer intelligence from Sysco. Britt, Jack, thanks for being on the CX Leader podcast, and we hope you'll come back again sometime. If you want to talk more about this or anything else we've discussed or how Walker could help your business customer experience, you can contact me at steve.walker@walkerinformation.com or call me here in the U.S. at 1-317-843-8890. Don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Jack, and I'm sure we could put you in touch with Britt. We'd love to tell you more about this. We recently hosted a webcast on change management where Jack, along with Noah Grayson, discussed change management and how you can drive action and apply the Sprint process to your CX efforts. Check out our show notes page for a link to the recording of that webcast. And don't forget to subscribe to the CX Leader podcast. You can go to walkerinfo.com/podcasts and you'll find links to iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play. And we've started posting our podcast to our YouTube channel as well. You can find those at youtube.com/walkerinformation. Thanks to all of our loyal listeners for getting us on all those great platforms. The CX Leader podcast really has become a great asset for the whole CX industry and all the professionals that produce such good work for your customers and help your businesses be successful by doing right by your customers. At Walker, we're a business consulting firm that can help you make customer experience your biggest competitive advantage. The CX Leader podcast is a production of Walker. You can find out more at walkerinfo.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast, and we'll look forward to having you on again next time.